Okay, part 3 of shoot 'em. So we got. Let's just quickly recap. We've got players moving around. I'll just control one of them. We've got a player moving around screen. We want to be able to shoot and shoot at each other. So let's just do that. So this is just gonna. We'll create another sprite and we'll launch that sprite in the direction we're facing. Okay, so that's all we're going to attempt to do. In order to do that, we need to set the players up so that they can shoot, because there was no control code in Actor for shooting. Remember the virtual, so I'm in Actor here, the virtual control code can be overridden, so we can add extra functionality. So let's do that. So let's look at player one, and we're going to go outside the constructor. So we're going to make sure that we've just got two braces at the end and we're just before those lines. So we're inside the class. So if we right click that brace, you can see it matches up with the opening one. So we're inside the class, and what we're going to do is we're going to say public, and then we're going to type the keyword override. Now Visual Studio can do something clever here. When I press space after that, it shows me what I can override. So the one I want to override is control, because that's what Actor defines. So I want to add some extra. So when I select control from the picker, it automatically puts all this in for me. Okay, and it's got this clever line in. So what this says is do all the stuff that Actor does. So we don't have to write any extra code to do the controlling. We're just going to say after that, let's put our shoot code. So we're going to say if gm dot input manager. Right, now before in our Actor code, we had if the keys held down, do something. But if we do that with shooting, that will mean we generate 100 bullets a second, which we don't really want. Okay, so we're going to use pressed. So we can say if something's been pressed, and what we're looking at is the keypad pair for shoot. If that's been pressed, we want to launch a bullet. Okay, right. What we need to do is we want to create a new bullet. We haven't got that class yet, but we're going to go ahead and tell Visual Studio that we're going to create a new bullet and we're going to give it some parameters. Now we're going to pass it the player that's shot, because the bullet needs to know who owns it. So we're going to give it that. Okay. But we're also going to give it where the top of the player's head is. Okay. So we're going to say new vector 3, and we're going to say center 2D dot x. So the top of the player's head is in the center of the player. It is, and the next parameter is the y value. So we can say top, and the z value we're not bothered about. So we're just going to put 0 for that. And then we're going to put at the end 500. Now that's a complicated looking line. It's got an error in it because we've got no bullet. But we're giving it 3 arguments. So we're giving it the player. We're giving it in the second one a 3D position. I'll explain why when we get onto the bullet definition. And we're giving it a number, 500. This is going to be how fast the bullet goes in pixels per second, because we're going to set a velocity for the bullet, because it's going to just manage itself. Right, it's moaning because bullet doesn't exist, so we're going to right click and we're going to say generate class, and it's created it straight away. But as usual, it puts the default libraries in there and we don't want them. So let's just go to player 2, copy the using statements, stick them in there. Now ideally we only want to put the using statements for the libraries that we're using, but just for simplicity's sake we're just sticking them all in there. Right, bullet is going to be a sprite, so we're going to say public sprite. Okay, that's quite important. Right, let's set up the basic things for the sprite. So the sprite's going to keep track of who its owner is, who its boss is. So we're going to say actor boss, because each of the players is an actor, remember? So we're going to say, right, okay then, let's store who your boss is. Right, we're going to create the constructs for bullet. So we're going to say public bullet, and it takes 3 arguments, remember. So the actor, so who the player is going to take a 3D start position, so that's a vector 3, and it's going to take a speed, which is going to be a floating point value, and that's how fast the bullet wants to be shot. The reason we've done that, in the future, we could have some flexible thing where we've got pickups where bullets go slower, bullets go faster. So we want to be able to tell the bullet to go at a specific speed that could change. All right, so that's why we've got it set as a parameter. Because it's a sprite, the first thing we should always do, engine manager, not the event manager, engine manager, add sprite. Okay. Right, the next thing, we're going to define where the bullet is on our texture, and you can take it from me that it is at this location. So we do frame.define gm.tx example, and the rectangular area where the bullet is at 1479 8x8. It's basically an 8x8 blob. Okay. Right, we are going to store who our boss is. So we're going to say this.boss equals the player. Right, and then we get onto some complicated things. We want to shoot the bullet in a direction, and the direction is the direction the player's facing. So that's using the rotation angle, that. But we want to shoot it at the top of the player's head, and the top of the player's head is going to change depending on how we're rotated. Okay, so I'm gonna do a couple of lines and I'm going to explain them to you. So we're going to set the bullet at the position we've been given, which was the top of the player's head. And then we're going to use the rotation helper, and we're going to get that. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit to use a method called, it's got a massive name, this rotate around point in Z plane. Okay, so basically 2D rotation. Now, it expects a ref, and that is a reference. So we're going to give it the address of a variable. Okay. So this is, we're not giving it a copy, we're giving it the actual memory location of where the variable is, so it can be altered by the rotate point around position in Z plane method. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, that, but that's what you're dealing with. So we're going to give it the sprite's position, because that's what we want to update. We want to rotate the bullet so that it stays with the head of the player. Right, we need to know where the center of the rotation is. Well, the center of the rotation is the player's center. So we're going to say player.center. Okay. And then we're going to know what angle we want to rotate. Well, that's going to be whatever angle the player is at. So we're going to say player.rotation angle. Okay. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you can just get that line on. So we set the position, and then we're going to rotate that point. So we set the bullet to be where the top of the player's head is when it's not rotated, and then we're rotating the bullet around the center of the player. Okay, quite a common task to want to do, to be honest. So we got it in the right position. Now what we want to do is move it in the direction that the player's sat. So the easy way of doing that, we set the rotation angle of the bullet to be the same as the player. And then what we can do is we can use the rotation helper again to say, okay, based on the angle we are, give me a velocity. So we're going to say rotation helper, velocity in current direction. It wants to know what sprite we want to manipulate. Well, it's this sprite, this bullet. It wants to know what speed we want to go at. So we're going to give it the speed value we've been given as a parameter. We're not bothered about any additional angles. Okay, so that's going to send it off at a certain direction. Okay. Right, we're nearly there and then we can show it. Right, we want to make the sprites the same color as the player. So we're going to say wash equals player.wash. That's why we passed the player as a parameter, because there was various bits of information we wanted. The other thing we want to do is if we shoot a bullet off screen, the game engine will, even though it's not drawing, will keep updating it. So eventually we'll end up running out of sprites and kill the game engine. So what we want to do is turn the limit box on. So we can say limit initialize, and then we're going to do a viewport action. But this time we're not going to make, I'm always doing things like that. We're not going to make the bullet stop at the edge because that would be bonkers. You have a load of bullets sat around the edge of the screen. What we're going to do is we're going to kill it once it's gone past. So we're going to say kill past. Okay. Right, that's a lot to digest. So let's just see what we did for player one. So we created an override for the control scheme of actor, but we actually wanted it to run. So we have this line that was made for us because the default is to actually do anything that the base class is doing or the parent class. So we said, right, okay, run your control code, but then do our control code. Now, I'm going to do exactly the same thing for player two. Now, I did say that this wasn't a good example of good practice, but I just wanted to show you how to override a virtual method and still call it. So I just wanted to show that as an example. So I'm going to copy this code and I'm going to put it in player two. And the very act that I am copying it and putting it in player two suggests that that's not the best way of doing this code-wise. Okay, but I just want to show you it as an example, just to give you a feel for it. I shouldn't need to change anything because I'm doing exactly the same thing. Right, so theoretically now, what I've got is a system that'll allow me to move around and shoot. So let's try that. Let's just see if it works. Let's see if I've messed something else up. So our simple title screen. Start our game. Oh, I've messed them up. Oh yeah, of course I have. I've messed them up. I've got a crash null reference exception, which would suggest that when I checked press, the value I checked was null. Oh yeah, of course it was. Right. Now this is a runtime error. So we've had a crash. We haven't set a value. So if you get a null, it's like, oh no, it doesn't exist. So there is a window called call stack which should have opened. This shows you all the methods that have run up to the point when that crash occurred. So this is the one that's highlighted now is the one we're in. Okay, now yours generally won't do this. It's showing me the engine, which it won't do for you because you won't. It might do it for you. I don't know. But generally you'll get like a null error, but you'll still see the call stack. So we can go back and we can see that it was this line that caused the error. Shoot is null, which is true because up here, when we define player one, we haven't said what shoot was. So we have to go back. So that's a nice crash. So I need to set up the shoot key, which is going to be a keypad pair. Now this is tricky. So if I'm using WASD to move, I want a shoot that's away from the other player. So I'm going to use G, I think keys.g for shoot. And on the pad 1, buttons dot, and I'm just going to use A, I think, on the old Xbox pad. Need to add that to player 2 as well. So copy that in player 2. Let's add in the constructor. So that's going to be pad 2 button A. But for that player, so they're using the left cursor. So I'm the cursor keys. Don't want to get in the way of the other player, so I'm going to use M. You can change these keys if you think there are better keys to use. Right, let's run that again. That was a nice error, that. I like that error. Right, so I've got my two characters, and they still move, thankfully. So that shows that that base control, the virtual control, is still actually being executed. But now when I press G, I get a red bullet. Remember, it's jerking because of Cam Studio. And when I press M, I get a blue bullet. Let's shoot that player in the face. Yes. And oh, they're not at the right angle. Let's rotate. There you go, shooting each other. But we're not because there's no collision detection. But we've got the action. So that's as fast as I can do it. Okay, so in the next vid, we're going to set up the collision code that's going to allow us to shoot each other. And then we can set up the scoring code. And what I'll show you when I'm doing that, I will show you how to communicate between objects by using messages. And we broadcast messages and we subscribe to messages so that we don't have to know anything about each other. Okay, and I'll show you that in part 4.